Hello and welcome to the Trail and Adventure Motorbike Podcast with me, Clive Barber, and my good mate, Noel Tom. For the days when you can't ride your bike, there's always the Trail and Adventure Motorbike Podcast. Welcome to the 20th and final episode of Season 2. You'll have to excuse my voice, I'm just recovering from COVID. Thankfully, it's not been too bad. We're off on a trip. So we're going to take a few weeks out, but we'll be back with Season 3. We've still got loads of great people lined up to be on the podcast, so we will be back in a few weeks' time. So we decided to go out with a bang. We're joined by the motorcycle legend that is Austin Vince. You all know him, right? Everybody knows him. Surely you wouldn't be here otherwise. But just in case, here is his entry from Wikipedia. Austin Vince is best known for his long-distance adventure motorcycle expeditions. Twice around the world as part of Mondo Enduro and Terra Circa, which were both produced as TV documentaries, as well as presenting the Mondo Enduro and co-presenting the Terra Circa TV programmes. Vince has also written and presented the Roots series on the Discovery Channel. Latterly, he played the maths teacher in the first 2 seasons of Channel 4's That'll Teach 'Em, and has in the past taught at St John's, Northwood, as a maths teacher. He also served in the Royal Engineers. Vince attended the private Mill Hill School in North London, then was sponsored through university by the army, but became a pacifist while there and had to pay them to get out. After university, he returned to Mill Hill as a teacher and used to teach at St John's in Northwood. He is married to long-distance female motorcyclist Lois Price, who has completed several notable expeditions on her own. He returned for a second stint at St John's School in Northwood before leaving in 2016 to pursue his passion for mini motorcycle adventure trips, brackets, mini mondos, in the Pyrenees.
Before we start then, is there a chance that this is too noisy and we should reschedule rather than you gamely go ahead and then we get something that you can't use or people complain about it?
We're not that fussy, to be honest.
No.
We're very much like yourself, DIY ethos. Just
but that doesn't excuse low production value.
No, it's. I think it'll be fine. We'll see. If it gets too bad,
We'd welcome that kind of interaction anyway, wouldn't we? We'd like that.
I think so. Adds character and something to talk about.
You're wrong on all of those points. It's just because you're charming doesn't mean that your shot could be out of focus.
Hey, listen, we've seen the baskets you've put on the front of your motorcycles. You can't criticise.
Well, you should.
Yeah, that's next. Yeah. As you've obviously guessed already, we like to keep it fairly light-hearted and fun. We normally go through just to get people to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about their biking history, and then we're going to move on. I've got quite a few questions too.
Great, far away.
Questions there.
Yeah.
And then we've got a 10-section either-or type scenario. And then we've actually got some listener questions as well. So we've got some trusted listeners. That
Have you advertised the fact that I was going to be on?
Only to about 6 people.
Okay.
To say if you've got any questions you'd like to send in. So we've got a couple.
Why only 6? Who are these 6 people?
Oh, it doesn't matter.
It's people that have been on. People have been on it mainly. They're the only people that listen.
I don't think that's in the spirit of the podcast to vet the questions.
They're all age 8 and under. That's all.
Imagine question time running like that.
We actually vet the listeners, let alone the people that are on the questions that are on the podcast. It's a very select audience, you see.
It's funny for me, this, Austin, because most people come on this blooming podcast and cite Charlie and What's-His-Face or Ewan and What's-His-Face as their main inspiration for getting into travelling by motorcycle. Whereas I think most people got into travelling by motorcycle because of you and because of the whole Mondo Enduro thing. And that's certainly how I got into it. It's great.
Because The Long Way Round is a remake of Mondo Enduro and Terra Circa.
Yeah.
And was where they got the idea from. I suppose we're both right.
Yeah. I'd never considered, before I read Mondo Enduro, which I stumbled across through a strange promotion in a magazine, I think, that I had a DR350 at the time. I never rode it more than 30 miles from home. I really didn't. And I never considered that I could travel on it until I read that. And I've been riding motorcycles for probably nearly 40 years at that stage.
Well,
it was a massive eye-opener.
for everybody that said that. And then if I had another nickel for the extraordinary inertia or lack of inertia or obstructive forces that the motorcycle industry has launched against normal sized bike as a long distance vehicle. I mean, it's quite mad. It really, when 100 years from now, when we're all dead and somebody kind of like writes some kind of retrospective history, they will ask, like those books about, I've got a book at home called Keeping It Light, we want to keep this nice.
No, don't ignore that. Ignore that advice.
I've got a book called The Gestapo, Jews and Ordinary Germans. and it's a massive, serious study of kind of like, how did they get away with it? That kind of, how did the Nazis do what they did without somebody, how much
without somebody saying, hang on. Yeah,
without and I think it's going to be like that. People are going to look back at this kind of enormous adventure bike madness thing and just say, was everybody asleep? or I mean, how? But there's a really serious lesson from history to keep it frivolous and frothy a bit more. If you can get a load of middle-aged men to do something incredibly nonsensical, and then get them to think that it's a good idea, then anything is possible.
Yeah, of course.
Anything is possible.
Yeah. Why spend $5,000 when you can spend 18 grand on a bike with much bigger margins? I mean, it's one of our pet things, isn't it? We talk constantly about getting smaller bikes because, I mean, where we ride, you just couldn't ride a 990 or a 1200 around the Lake District. Well, you could if you were Christian Pfeiffer, or bless his soul.
But I think I've heard you say, Austin, that the perfect adventure bike is a bike that you can pick up, carry around, has as little sort of is maintenance free as possible, and it's essentially a bicycle.
Of course. Yeah, or the perfect adventure bike is the smallest motorbike you're prepared to be seen on.
Yeah. So, and I always think it's funny when the CRF came out, all the journalists, I remember reading lots and lots of articles saying, who's going to buy this bike? What is this bike for? It completely baffled them, didn't it? That someone had made a 250 trail bike. Who's going to buy it? I read every journalist saying, who's going to buy this bike? And they just did not see it coming at all, did they? I don't think.
Well, that's another extraordinary thing that I've learned in the last 20 years that I didn't know, let's say 30 years ago when I passed my motorbike test. It never occurred to me that it's like the music press, actually. If you do an actual academic study of the music press and the music industry, it's quite extraordinary how out of touch it is, given that that's the thing that they're meant to be in touch with.
Yeah.
The one thing that they're meant to know a bit about. And I've seen so many. My best friend from university, he and I were in a band together at university. He went on to become the editor of Kerrang, and then he became the editor of Mojo, and remained editor-in-chief of Kerrang and Q magazine. So I've kind of, through him, I've always had a kind of funny little finger on the pulse of the music industry. Certainly since, let's say, the mid '80s. I first met him in 1984, and we talk all the time. And I've really been fascinated in the parallels between the music press and the motorcycle press in terms of the way that the press and the industry exists only to sell you something.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist to promote what is good.
No, definitely not.
Anyway, that's a very broad issue.
Yeah.
We can now take this podcast in a very different direction. I can imagine the keyboard warriors are already hitting their complain now shortcut button. They haven't mentioned knobbly tires once. And what is this? Just like talking rubbish about records. but it was going to go on about the CD next. The CD is not as good as the Alpha 12 is. Shut up, Vince! Shut up!
Sure. Well, I was going to say, I'm sure I once heard, I think Greg might have told me this story, that you'd once gone to a TRF meeting to give a talk on, what everybody thought was going to be talk on trail riding and anything to do with the TRF. And I think instead you gave a very interesting talk on, I think, either steam or railways.
Or was it safety films or something like that? It was Andy Hill.
Andy Hill.
Was it?
No, that was I know what you're talking about. That was one night where I was booked to compare a night of 1950s and 60s British public information films at the something what's it called, the something festival in the Yorkshire Dales near Appletree Wick, and the Grassington Festival. Is that it?
Possibly. That's round that way. Right? Yeah. Sounds about right.
I was booked to talk at the Grassington Festival, and I said, "Can I do my specialist subject of 1950s and 60s public information films?" And they said, "Yeah, sure." Somebody found out I was speaking and assumed
it's going to be about motorbikes. Of course.
Assumed that I lived by bread alone. And that I wasn't, unfortunately for them, one-dimensional. And imagine how disappointed they were. Of course, the irony being that I'll never forget that night, because it was the first time I'd met somebody who left halfway through the trip and came up to me and said, "I'm not staying because you're not talking about motorbikes." And then all I could think was, what on earth is it like being married to you?
So I wanted to get back to Ewan and Charlie.
Oh, great!
What?
Why? Because I love them. You know that.
Yeah, you do.
I didn't say why. Or did Noel say why?
I said why.
Noel said why. Yeah. Do you know why? Because basically, it was coming up to my 40th birthday when The Long Way Round came on, and my wife is a big Ewan McGregor fan. I've told this story before on an earlier podcast. Well, he's great. He's great.
So handsome.
Well, people from like Star Wars films, they don't particularly like him, but that's another story. And she loved him, and we watched The Long Way Round, and we really enjoyed it. And she said to me, "You've always wanted to get your motorbike license. Why don't you get it sorted?" And basically, I went, "Yeah," booked it the next day, and haven't looked back since. So I've got a certain soft spot for him. Were you involved in The Long Way Round before? Are you happy to talk about that?
I'm bored of talking about it.
Hey,
I've never heard you talk about it before. I want to know what you did and then what went wrong.
In one sentence, then we'll move on.
I want to talk about it at length.
I don't want to talk
for the next hour.
I'd rather talk about it at length with you in another setting
when we weren't recording the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. What I'd rather do is write you a list of 15 questions to ask Charlie Baldwin. He doesn't normally get asked.
Yeah.
We could do that.
And that could be how we handle this. But it's too depressing for me, really. It would be like getting to talk about a bereavement or something.
Yeah, that's
I would actually rather talk about my dad dying than use my free time to be talking about Ewan McGregor and Charlie Baldwin. I've got better things to do.
I was going to say that's fine. We'll edit this bit out, but I'm going to leave that bit in because I like that bit.
Do you still have? I know you had terrible luck with 350s getting stolen. Do you have any DRs left?
No, they were all stolen. I've owned I'd say about 8 DR 350s, and every single one was stolen.
It's heartbreaking to think that they're out there and people don't know the provenance of them anymore. Yeah. That's terrible, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's highly unlikely that somebody is looking at it like a piece of art and saying, "That's the bike."
And the tanks.
Yeah.
The tanks were handmade for us. That is another. That to me is a great Ewan McGregor parallel. They get paid to do a trip.
Yeah.
They make more money than anybody has ever seen in their life just from the book advance for a book they didn't write. They then become basically the patron saints of motorcycling for a trip that probably will be analysed as being possibly the least adventurous thing that any man has ever done in terms of a step into the unknown.
Yeah.
And then at the end of it, I think one of their bikes was sold, and notionally money was given to charity or something like that, And then our story is like the exact opposite of that. Although, these losers go off on this trip that financially cripples them for the rest of their lives, really. Yeah. And then they spend years trying to get the film made, which is so difficult to do when you're a member of the public. To get it on television back in those days, it was incredibly difficult and a massive effort to get that film on television. And then while we were doing that, within weeks of getting back to England, 3 of the bikes were stolen.
No,
never to be seen again. It's just you couldn't ask for two stories that were more utterly the glory, the long way around, the glory, the prestige, the everything's amazing about it. Everything's great, and then our kind of like pathetic version that ironically preceded it.
And did you feel quite satiated in terms of long distance travel? Have you ever wanted to do another trip as big as that?
No, I'm not in the least bit interested in long distance motorcycling, but I would, if I was dictator, I would insist everybody motorcycle around the world before they were allowed to get married. That would be my criteria.
Does everyone from the trip still ride a motorcycle? No. Or really? No, that's interesting.
Got married, had kids.
Yeah.
Let's go back a step then. So, how did you get into biking? Were you, because I sense you may have been some kind of an adventurer before you were a biker.
No, I've never been an adventurer. I'm a member of the public. I'm absolutely not adventurous, nor am I an adventurer. No, I just like normal people. My older brother rode a motorbike. It was the 70s. He looked cool. It just seemed obvious when you had sat on the back of his bike, and he took me to school once, and that was like, this is amazing. Yeah. And then, as my parents were obviously anti-motorcycle, like so many people's. But I didn't have the. I'm so jealous of the people who grew up on farms and got put on motorbikes by their dads.
Yeah.
Something like that. I think I was very. I was an early BMX person in, let's say, between about 1972 and 1976. When there was no such thing as a BMX bike, but my dad got me a bicycle from America that had big profile tires, not as big as what we'd now call a fat bike, but what we'd now call BMX tires. Compared to in Britain, obviously all bicycle tires were normal sized.
Yeah.
And he got me this bicycle, and I turned it into I used it to do only jumps, and I was obsessed with Evel Knievel. I had the toy and everything, but really obsessed with Evel Knievel. I went to Wembley. I saw the jump at Wembley. It was my birthday present treat. Me and a couple of mates from school. My dad took us.
I love that story because he came over and they hadn't done the calculations right, and he knew that jump that he was trying to do was impossible. So he knew he was going to crash.
I disagree, Clive.
Is that not the right jump?
I might not have the information that you've got, but if you watch it, if you watch the film of it again and again and again, I just put it down to being a slightly awkward landing, and his perennial problem of the ramp being, not at the right angle. He did the distance, but he landed on the flat
because they knew they weren't going to do it. So he put an extra bit of flat bit across the last couple of buses, I believe.
Yeah.
So he knew he wasn't going to make the down ramp, so they extended the ramp over the buses. And I think because he landed on the flat, he crashed anyway.
Yeah, that bounced. The suspension just threw him straight back in the air, didn't he?
How old were you then, Austin, when you went to see that?
Oh, I can't. Well, I think it was actually about 77, something like that. So let's say I was 10.
But how was it for all the sort of people around the age of 10?
Of course, it happened so quickly.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's not clear, unless you were there, is that there was 2 hours of relatively uninteresting support acts.
I was going to say, how did they make it into a show? What else did they do?
There was an old man who did that thing where he dives off a tower and does a belly flop landing in a child's paddling pool. And that was, because it was at Wembley, you were by definition far away from everything. but the old man doing the belly flop stunt was right in front of us. That was insane. I couldn't believe my eyes. And he was wearing a pair of old cowboy film style long johns and combination undergarments. What we'd call long johns and a thermal vest, white ones. But they didn't look like they were special stunt clothes. They looked like his actual underwear. So, and then there was somebody else who did. I can't remember what it was. There was some juggling or something like that. Maybe someone was doing some tumbling.
It was different times,
like circus style stuff. And then Knievel came out and he did the wheelies. He just wheelied up and down the side of what would be like the athletics track or the speedway track, and that was great. And then when the jump came, he did like something mad. He did like 6 dry runs to build tension, and then turned around at the end. And then when he finally, I wouldn't remember any of it if I hadn't been able to watch on YouTube the footage of the.
Yeah, but it's almost akin to being on the grassy knoll, isn't it, in terms of history? For a motorcyclist,
for men of our age, anyway.
Yeah,
and it was, and of course, if we're going to talk about authenticity, it's the real thing.
Yeah,
it was if I went to Nitro Circus and watched them doing what they do, I just don't feel aroused.
Yeah.
Even when you see something groundbreaking, let's say like a double back somersault on a dirt bike, you know they were able to train for it.
Yeah, the jeopardy's not there, is it really? No.
I reckon I could do a double backflip on a dirt bike with the training and the expertise that's available.
Yeah.
If I had somebody who could help me do it. But what Knievel did was truly irresponsible.
But then on the night, but the crash happens, and then you all shuffle out crying.
Well, when he said he's never going to jump again, and also I tell you what, I'll never forget about that talk, that show, was he before the jump, he came up and he said, right, I want to talk to you about narcotics. And I remembered
what a nerve,
not knowing what that meant at all. And from the context, I couldn't work it out either. I was sufficiently clean living from a drug-free home that I didn't know what he was talking about. And he had this. Do you know what his analogy is? Do you guys know this story?
No.
Because I think he used to do it at a lot of shows. Given that he was like essentially an alcoholic, it's just so brilliant. But he had this. He said, you might get, especially he says, there's a lot of youngsters in the audience, and it's great to see you here today, but you might get offered narcotics. He goes, let me tell you something. Every year I go to the Indy 500. I love going to the Indy 500. Every year there's somebody there who tricks out their car, fits it out with nitrous, and they put illegal substances in their gasoline to give them the extra oomph for the extra power. And it does. It gives them the extra oomph for the extra power, and they go faster than ever. Lap after lap after lap, they go faster than ever. But then just towards the end of the race, they blow all to hell. That's what will happen when you take narcotics. It feels good. You're at the front. You're ahead of everyone, but then you blow all to hell. Stay away from narcotics. I just, even when he said that, I still didn't, because I wasn't sure, because I didn't understand the racing fuel analogy either. I was too young for that.
Yeah.
Too young for everything. Too young for the message. I love this idea that this guy's about to do this really badly thought through jump. And let's say Clive's right, and that they had one bus too many.
Yeah.
And then he's lecturing you on safety.
Ride safe, kids.
Yeah, so that was, it was the 70s. My older brother had a motorbike. I wanted to get one. I wasn't allowed to, and I had to wait until I got to university, and then secretly bought an MZ TS 125, which I think under EU law would not be allowed to be described as a motorbike. It was so awful, just uselessly inefficient.
That would be a 2-stroke motorcycle.
Yeah. It just, it only ran about a quarter of the time I owned it.
Yeah.
It was hopeless. And really, it was character building, of course. The seeds of the long distance traveling really came from my brother Gerald, who, as a matter of course, during the 80s, let's say from the mid 80s, because he's 9 years older than me, he was always obviously 9 years ahead of me. He's a bit of a lone wolf and a natural iron butt person. Only needs cigarettes and coffee and alcohol to keep going. Doesn't need rest or creature comforts like the rest of us. And he, during the 80s, he would get on his motorbike and he would drive as far as he could in his 3 weeks of holidays from the railways. So sometimes he did that in America. He'd fly to America, get hold of a motorbike from somewhere, and do these insane. He'd be riding 600 miles a day, every day, on tarmac. Not really even doing anything. Just one of those people who the act of motorcycling itself was the catharsis.
Yeah.
And so I didn't want to do that at all, but he was just there. And so because he was the older brother, everything kind of like, he was the filter that everything went through. And eventually he said, come on, let's go to Morocco and back. So I did that. He kind of kidnapped me. The day after I left my course at Sandhurst, I had 2 weeks of leave, and I went to my mum and dad's house, obviously, and he said, and he told me, I'm going to take you away on the motorbike, and we went 2 up on his FJ 1200 around down through France and Spain, around Morocco, came back, just tarmac the whole way. And
was Gerald working on the railways at this point?
Yeah, he was working at Bournemouth then. Yeah, Bournemouth railway station. And so that was that was quite boring. But I think then, but we took turns riding, took turns driving, sort of thing. We camped out a bit every now and then. We had no catering equipment, so we didn't eat. We never rough camped properly, which would have been great fun. But I'm just amazed at how all the things that I now take as a given in my, dare I call it, on the tours that I run in the Pyrenees, everything we do on those tours, I didn't do myself. It took me decades to work out what I would suggest is a really good template for a great week of trail riding and rough camping and stuff like that. It was not obvious. It was a massive process of iteration, trip after trip after trip. I would even say on Mondo Enduro, I was 6 months into Mondo Enduro, 180 days living on the road, rough camping, South Coast, everything like that, and still hadn't quite worked out what the template was, what the formula was. If we'd stayed with Gerald's template, it would have just been like these. We'd have emigrated to America and done iron butt rallies. That's where he wanted it to end up, sort of thing. And then we did this trip around Eastern Europe in 1990 or 1991. That changed everything. Once we did a long trip, and on the trip we discovered, let's call it, other cultures that were different from our own. And then that was the light bulb moment when we thought, wait a minute, the places we are far more interesting than the act of motorcycling itself. And that's when Mondo Enduro was born.
I think anyone who hasn't read it, I would urge them to buy it and read it. It's a wonderful. It's a sort of a diary format, isn't it?
It is a diary. I can give you a miniature Long Way Round story. Long Way Round happened, came out, and by complete coincidence or chance, not coincidence, by complete chance, I was at a party with a friend of mine who was a big noise in journalism in London. He was the former editor of the Guardian Guide, the little A5 colour, what's on guide that came with the Guardian at the weekend. And a friend of his was the head of acquisitions at a big publishing company who I won't name to avoid embarrassing anyone. And my friend introduced me to this other guy, to his friend, the head of acquisitions, and with the line, "Oh, here's Austin. This is Austin. He rides a motorbike." And this other guy said, "Oh yeah, I've got a treatment for a book by this actor, Ewan McGregor, who's done this trip." Yeah, we pulled out of the bidding war for it when we got to an advance of £600,000. Wow. So the advance they did get was obviously definitely more than 600,000 quid.
Yeah,
and they hadn't, they not only did they not write it. Yeah. They weren't even going to write it. And so that was a bit, I had that kind of, totally by chance, I had that experience. In other words, I was the only person in that party, in that room in Camden Town, who had a motorbike license. I wasn't in a motorbike community. I was in a, dare I say, a London metrosexual media community. And then the thing that happened then was that I got an email from a guy saying, "Hi, I run a publishing company in Scotland. Is there a Mondo Enduro book?" And I said, "No." Strangely enough, the guy who was the actual journalist, the actual writer on the trip, Chas Penty, he tried to get the book published back in 96. Nobody would touch it.
Had you all set out writing diaries? Were you all just diary writers, or had you set out with the intention of coming up with a journal at the end of all the diaries amalgamated together?
It was Gerald's idea. Again, Gerald was obsessed with the idea of recording the hard data of how many miles we went each day and where we started and where we finished. So he wanted diary entries that were essentially a sentence for each day. And then people started kind of like kidnapping the diary and writing a bit more.
Yeah.
And then because actually everybody on the crew except Gerald could string a sentence together, it then became a thing. Writing the diary became actually, of course, our therapy.
Yeah.
And you went off on your own and you got a beer and you went away from the rest of the others, sat under a tree and started writing the diary. So that very quickly, within 2 weeks, the diary took on a life of its own.
Yeah.
The 7 of us, we each wrote the same day of the week. I was writing Tuesdays.
So there was never a point where you got to the end of 2 or 3 days and you realised, oh, no one's written the diary.
No. And also very quickly, because there were 7 of us, the jobs that we had to take care of communally, the other 6 would do and would leave the diary writer at every moment in the day. We'd stop for a morning coffee somewhere, make a brew ourselves on the stove. The diary writer would go and sit on his own and start writing up what had happened in that first 3 hours. The discipline was extraordinary.
Yeah.
And so, the last bit of that story is that this bloke phoned me up, emailed me. He said, is there a Monday Jura book? I said, no, we've tried to publish one, but failed. And we were chatting, and he said, I've seen the TV show, and I've just watched this Long Way Round thing. And he said the difference between Monday Jura and Long Way Round is chalk and cheese. Yet they're the same thing, but they're not the same thing. And I said, I said, tell me about it. But, I said, I definitely know that. And he said, well, I've got a publishing company. Do you think you could write a book? I said, oh God, no way. I'm a full-time teacher. I'm working to pay off the debts from Terra Circa by this stage. I'd only been back from that trip about 3 years. I was still paying for Terra Circa. So there's no way I'm writing a book. And I think Chaz, who was the proper author, he lives in Madrid now. He's got 2 small children. He doesn't want to be writing a book. And so that was it. I said, and I can't remember exactly what happened, but I said, yeah, we just got the diaries and that's it. And then that's when this guy, his ears pricked up. He goes, what do you mean the diaries? I said, we wrote a diary every day. He goes, oh, how much? Like, I said, a couple of sentences. I said, no, we wrote about 1,000 words every day. He goes, what? I said, yes. Sorry, I said, I should have mentioned this. Yeah, there's 250,000 words already written about Mondovaduro. He goes, can you send me these diaries? I said, yeah, all right then. No, they were just in a shoebox under my bed. So I sent him the diaries, and about 3 days later, he emailed me back. He says, this is it. This is the book. We just print it like it is. No change anything.
So it wasn't heavily edited or edited at all, or abridged.
Only to remove spelling mistakes and a few factual errors where we got the names of towns, we spelt the names of towns wrong and stuff like that. So I think there's a lot of interesting things about Mondovaduro, but one of them is that when you read that book, you're reading a book that was never meant to be read by anyone. We just wrote it. There was a small contract whereby we said to our parents, we're not going to write letters home. It's going to be too difficult. But what we will do is we'll write the diary and we'll send that home. And then we sent it to my mum and dad in Bournemouth. And then they sent it to the next set of parents. And there was like a chain letter. And then the parents got it and they read like 30, 40 days of what we'd been up to. And then they waited like another 3 months for the next volume of the diary to arrive. They were that thick, they were A5, 100 pages. And so it was just written for our parents. So that's why there was no bad language in it, and there was no references to sex, or there was no references to any excessive behaviour. Now, both my parents have died in the last 5 years, so now I could write the real story of Mondovaduro. But now that I'm married, I can't do that either. But it was, of course, just a load of guys on the road.
It's an amazing read.
It's one of girls and have fun.
Yeah, it's one of the few books I've read where I was getting towards the end. I was kind of panicking. It's going to end. I don't want this book to end. I was gutted when I'd finished it.
Is it still in print? Can people still buy it, Austin?
No.
I've just had a quick search on Amazon, and you can get it for £38 on Amazon.
I wonder if you can. If you try and buy that might not even exist. Somebody investigated this for me. It gets posted there. Somebody saw it for sale the other day for like £150, a second-hand one. It was mad. I keep meaning, it's on my list of things to do is to republish it, especially now that you can do that so easily with. But I'm too busy doing other things, and I'd like to put it out again. I think I read bits of it every now and then. Actually, I haven't even got a copy of it. I've only got the original diaries. I haven't got a copy of the book, would you believe? But when I read the diaries, especially in the light of what's happened really since Long Way Round and the adventure bike explosion, I read it, I just think, fucking hell, this is amazing. I cannot believe I was one of these guys doing this. I cannot, I think it's incredible.
I'll sign my copy and send it to you.
I'm keeping mine. You get 38 quid for it. Well, I was going to ask about, you're obviously quite busy with all the various events that you have going on. We will talk about those in a bit, but do you get a chance to ride now for pleasure?
I don't. I'm not one of these people who would like drive their motorbike on a sunny day to a tea wagon and have a cup of tea and then drive home. I would never do that. I haven't got enough time for that. But because I do so much motorcycling on my trips in Spain and so much motorcycling preparing the Vince navigation event, which is like, that takes like 3 weeks of incredibly intense, aggressive trail riding. I don't mean like, get out of my way. Like really long, busy days in the saddle over new, fresh territory with the maps, constantly working the maps, working an area, trying to find every single trail that exists in a given 800 square mile part of the Pyrenees. That's, by the end of that, I go out to Spain twice a year to do that. So I'm doing 8 and 9, 10 weeks of non-stop trail riding. So a lot of the rest of the year, I'm often not trail riding. Not because I'm sick of it, but there's other things I really want to do, and I can't make trail riding my only hobby.
What first drew you to the Pyrenees?
Oh, very specifically, an article in Trail Bike magazine in about. Oh, hang on, let me just think. In about 1999, that where they sent or Simon Elba or whoever it was, they sent a correspondent out to Motoaventuras, who were based in Andorra, and they went trail riding for a day, and the pictures were mind-blowing. And me and my brother had been taking groups of mates out to Almeria to ride around where they make the westerns. I was obsessed with spaghetti westerns, so it was a double whammy to go trail riding down a valley that Clint Eastwood had ridden down on a horse in a western. I was just like covered in semen by the end of it. And,
your own, presumably, or somebody else's?
No, it was a team building trip. So that's where we used to go for our trail riding. And also, we hadn't really discovered trail riding in the UK. I wasn't then. I think 1997 we did our first one of these trips. I wasn't in the TRF. I didn't know the TRF existed. I didn't know trail riding existed. And I honestly thought if you wanted to ride a motorbike across some rough country, you probably had to go to a desert in Spain to do it. I didn't know that you could do that in England. So we were already going as far as Almeria to go trail riding. And then when I found out that you could go to the Pyrenees, and we saw these incredible pictures in Trail Bike magazine, that was the moment. Absolutely, that exact article was when we used to drive through the Pyrenees, cursing at the tunnels and the wiggly roads and all that. It never occurred to us that the area was the most bloody obvious thing of all was that Spain is crisscrossed with like 10 times as many trails as it has miles of tarmac. That ratio, that level of network, and we didn't realize. We were driving through this network on tarmac roads to get to an actual desert. We didn't realize that you could ride along an old farmer's trail. We thought you had to go to a dry river valley that was used in a western. So stupid. Yeah. I needed a mentor. A mentor so much.
Well, tell us about the trips that you've got coming up, because we're getting into riding season, presumably, for your stuff.
Yeah, I do 3 weeks in May, June, and then we do about 4 weeks in September. So now after, let's say 24 years of going to the Pyrenees every year has made me an expert on the area. I know every single hotel, gas station, supermarket. I know more trails in the Pyrenees than anybody in the world, I think. I know more than Spanish people do, because my experience out there is that Spanish dirt bikers work their own area. But they don't do what I do, which is go to different areas, hundreds of miles apart, move in to a building, and then spend the next 3 weeks aggressively riding every single trail that's on the map, and then now that's what we used to do in the old days. Now that we've got Google Earth and GPSs, we can find trails that aren't on the map, which is of course the great dream. So yeah, I started the map reading thing, the events, about 17 years ago, the Variable Intensity Navigation Challenge event, and I just wanted to. The school teacher in me. Once I discovered how extraordinary the Catalan Pyrenees are. I was thoroughly enjoying the map reading. That was the whole thing. All the motorcycle trips around the world, you never have to map read at all, not properly. You just on tarmac the whole time. But out in the Pyrenees, we got these old crappy Spanish army maps from Stanford's in Covent Garden. Hooray for them! They're still going. Go get your maps from them. And we got these maps and would mark them up, looking for trails. We'd stare at the map, trying to find a little black line that went from one place to another, and that was it. And we would spend hours and hours, me and my brother Gerald and a few other mates. We'd just sit there with these maps for hours on end in the spring. And then we'd have like 6 or 7 or 10 of these maps, make a little schematic, do a little hand-drawn thing, and then we'd drive out in the van with the bikes on the trailers, park the van, and then we'd try and ride the first trail that was on the map. And most of the time, it worked. Sometimes it was a disaster because the map was wrong. Yeah. But when it worked, the combination of trail riding and map reading was a new high for me. And I had by then started trail riding in the UK. I'd become a member of the TRF, lifetime member of the TRF. And so I was doing my English trail riding, my British trail riding and loving it, but invariably was guided by a local expert who would just take me and my mates off on a trip. We'd have a brilliant time. Obviously, we love it, love the trail riding. Everything's great. But the Class A stuff was the self-navigation in the Pyrenees, the trail riding plus the map reading. I was loving that so much. I had this idea of an orienteering event, and I couldn't think how to do it. And I thought, well, there's no such thing as motorcycle orienteering. How's that going to work? There's no organisation that does something like this. I can't go and offer to help somebody else organise something like this for them. Dare I say it? If you look at the story of my life, I had to do it myself. Yeah. There was no one to turn to, so I created my own map reading event and wrote a letter. Me and Lois wrote a paper letter to every single person that we knew with a motorbike license in the spring of like 2004 or 2005, one of those years, 2005, and we said we've got this idea for a map reading event. We've set up a load of checkpoints in Spain, and they're just sitting there. And would you like to do it? And of those, we sent the letter to 82 people, and 64 of them turned up. And they're all friends of ours. They were all, some people went out and bought dirt bikes just to do it. Yeah. And it's weird because instead of it being like 7 people or 12 people, the response from our mates was astonishing. And so we marketed it as me and Lois's, we'd done the first reconnaissance on honeymoon. So we marketed it as a honeymoon, our first anniversary honeymoon party. And all these people came out. We booked a hotel in Spain, and they came and did this thing. And there were 32 checkpoints. I'll never forget that. Now there's 88 over a much bigger area. It's just, it's much more difficult now than it used to be. And everyone loved it. And me and Lois just sat at the hotel. It's kind of literally like not so much waiting for the phone to ring, but just waiting for people to come back and hoping that they'd come back and say, that was insane. That was like one of the best things I've ever done. And without blowing my trumpet too much, that is exactly the reaction we got. They loved it. And so we said, we all got pissed that night. And then I said something like, I did a speech at the end saying, thanks for coming, everyone. This is great. My marriage has lasted a year. Thank you, Lois, for being my trail riding companion. I would never have done this without her. I'd never had the time off, away from my wife to do it on my own, set it all up on my own. Thank you so much, sweetheart. And then I sort of said, I had too much booze. And I said, should we do this again next year? And everyone cheered. And that was it. So I was like, oh my God. So we had to kind of, it was a long story, but we had to kind of create another one of these events in a different place in time for next year. And then that was it. And that was pretty much 18 years ago.
I remember being captivated by the sort of 8mm promotional films you did of it. They just looked absolutely dreamy. Before I'd even been to the Pyrenees, I just thought that looks amazing.
We shot a lot of Super 8. I was in the 90s, in the 90s and the early noughties. I was shooting my entire life on Super 8. I've got tons of Super 8 of those years of everything: barbecues, parties, school days, sports days. It's a bit mad, really. Yeah. It's already a format that's 40 years behind the times.
Yeah. But with those bikes and open face helmets, it really looked great, didn't it?
Yeah, it was. It was great. It was great fun.
So how does it work then? So people stay at a hotel and then you just head out and back in a day to find as many of the GPS points as you can, but without GPS.
There's 88 checkpoints spread over about 800 square miles. We all stay in a hotel kind of in the middle of the map. You get sent the maps and the checkpoint booklet that says where all the checkpoints are 8 weeks before the event. And the idea is that normally it's a 2-day event, but this year it's a 3-day event because there's so many more trails this year. The experience has shown that it's the only motorcycle event that I know of where the organisers set it up so that there's no possibility of you completing the project. So a big part of the game is for you to decide, well, what can we do and what should we do? What route should we choose to make it the most effective? So I set up all of the trails are a big spaghetti jumble. You know, the trail network's meant to look like a London Underground map. That was always my inspiration. And you know that thing where people try and go to every London Underground station in a day. That was always at the front of my mind. I want to replicate that, but on motorbikes in the Pyrenees. And so when you get the map, you are overwhelmed by what's on offer. But you have to sit down with your teammates and say, well, look, what actually are we going to do? Then throw into the mix that there's obviously only petrol in certain places. Obviously, it's not that far away, but you need to legislate for that. And also, the map is wrong a lot of the time. So when you get amongst the things that you get sent before the event is all of the mistakes on the map. And I create correct versions of all the little bits of the map that are wrong. And I show you what it is now at the moment, and then I show what it should be. So all the places that I get lost because the map's wrong, you get given all of them, so that you never get lost. That's the idea. And that is a massive amount of information. Once again, you don't need all of it, but you've got to work out what route you're going to do, maybe so as to minimize the number of places where the map's wrong on your particular itinerary.
Are people navigating completely by map, or are they making a road book from it? Or
so last year, or no, 2 years ago, was the first time that we allowed GPS. My business partner, Di Jones, had been bending my ear about this, and he virtually begged me to have a GPS category for the people who just didn't. They wanted to do the trail riding, but they weren't interested in the map reading. And I, of course, couldn't believe that there was such a person. that there was a person who didn't relish the map reading as actually that's the difficult thing. The trail riding is the easy bit. The map reading is the real crux of it. Anyway, so we created the GPS version 2 years ago, but you still have to program your own routes into your GPS. Yeah. We don't give you the GPS plots. The punchline is that only about 1 in 10, 1 in 20, only about 1 in 20 of the teams opt for GPS.
Interesting.
19 out of the 20 teams, obviously they've got some self-respect, so they don't. They're not, it's like, and the first year we did it, there was only one team enter the GPS section, and everybody else was map only. Yeah. And they came up, they got a bottle of wine or something for winning it, and all they had to do was of course get to the end of the day, and they'd won. But then then they were just like booed off the stage. So, but of course, I want people to go out there and enjoy it. I'm just obsessed with sharing it, and there's enough room out there. There's enough room and there's enough space to share it and it not be a problem at all.
Are you still doing a twin shock version then of this?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's with the people who do that, that's a huge thing. And they always have the maddest bikes.
Yeah. What do you use on that event?
I don't take part. I create it, but I don't compete.
Right. I thought you were in it as well.
No, I did it 1 year. There was a team from Gloucestershire who I thought were cheating. And I thought they were coming out early and pre-riding the trails and picking up the answers from the checkpoints early, and then submitting points total at the end of the event that was inflated and just not possible. So I entered 1 year with Nick Plum, the Paris-Dakar racer. He was my partner, and he crashed. I didn't, and his chain snapped, and I had to repair it with my stuff.
I once went riding with Nick Plum, and he crashed, and I didn't.
Yeah.
Oh, you never crashed though, do you, Noel?
No, I never have crashed. I haven't crashed since 1986.
But I might add that Nick Plum is most definitely 1,000 times the rider I am, and he'll be the first to agree with that.
So when do these events take place, and how do people book onto them?
Well, you go to austinvince.com and it's all there. Everything, my whole motorcycle world is there. So the navigation event, the Vince and Twin Shot Trail Finder, they have the same entry form type thing. The event takes place once a year, and this year it's 12th, 13th, 14th of September. And that's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I've booked this enormous resort thing, which used to be a medieval village. Fell into disrepair when the local valley was dammed and flooded. Everyone lost their fields. The village was abandoned, and then the government stepped in and restored it and turned it into a kind of like 4-hotel complex. So part of it used to be a monastery as well. It's an amazing place. But also, the Vince moves around the Pyrenees every year on a 9-year rotation. So if you did it every year consecutively, in the 10th year, you'd be doing the one that you did in the first year, sort of thing. Yeah, so it happens in mid-September. There's 112 people entered for it at the moment. Teams, I'm very proud to say, from Denmark, Holland, Germany, obviously UK, one USA team and one Italian team. So that's my my dream was to kind of like to try and turn it into like a kind of festival of Tet. I wanted all the if I could speak freely, I wanted all the Tetters, all the people that think the Tet's good and get the Tet. I wanted them to Tet their way to the Vince, do the Vince, and then Tet their way home. It was like just like having a big, and of course it's a massive piss up. You know, it's meant to be. It was always meant to be a huge party with a map reading event in the middle of it, sort of thing. You know,
I love the fact that Tet has now become a verb. To Tet, I Tet, you Tet, he, she, it Tets.
You Tet, they Tet.
How do you get down to Spain? Do you ever ride down, or do you always?
Yeah, I sometimes I go with my business partner Di Jones in his van. It works out that way. Other times I need to go before him, or I need to go after him, and so I just ride out on the CRF 250L with my luggage. It's a joy. I love riding out on the.
Do you A-road it down, or do you take the tolls, or avoid?
No. If it's not raining, if it's raining, I'll go on the motorway and just sit there like a courier. Yeah. Just sit there and just grind it out. It's awful. There's no way you can sugarcoat that. But if it's not raining, I'm on the smallest roads I can lay my hands on. Yeah. And I've got an old spiral bound atlas, and I mark with a highlighter pen my route, and I kind of every year I do a different route.
Do you ever ride with a sat nav on the bike?
I did once 2 years ago. I did my first ever crossing of France with a GPS. I only bought my first GPS 2 years ago. So I'd never, ever, ever, and I've never used my phone as a GPS. So that was a big step for me to kind of load a route into the Garmin and follow it. I quite enjoyed it because I didn't, you don't know, but I didn't like not knowing where I was. Yeah. I like the paper. I like the map. I like the spine. I like turning the pages over as we work our way across France. And I like the train spotter in me. I like colouring in the bit that I've just done.
I used to have an elderly relative that lived in the Pyrenees, and he had an elderly friend lived in Northumberland, and he talked me into going to visit him driving down, and his elderly friend in Northumberland bought a little compass and glued it to the dash of his car.
Oh, yeah?
And just headed south via the compass.
In France?
Yeah, but from Northumberland to the Pyrenees, just using the compass glued to the dash of his car.
That's cool. I heartily approve.
I had a map from Stamford, so the first time I went to Morocco, and I did exactly the same thing, marked out the route and all the towns we visited, and then I lent it to somebody. I have no idea who I lent it to, but I never got it back. Gutting. Can we talk about the film festival?
Yeah, sure.
Just the Adventure Travel Film Festival.
Correct.
Noel's a big fan.
I've been to many film festivals, of your film festivals.
Oh, great. Yes. And we've shown one of your films at least once.
Yeah. Don't know how I talked you into that, but I've always found
you did talk me into it. Hey, listeners, just let's be clear. Noel did not talk me into showing his film, because when I watched that film, I didn't know it had been made by you, Noel. I watched it, I loved it, and I thought this is just what we need. And then I looked up on my little list who'd made it, and it was your name, and I recognised that name as a mutual friend of we have in Greg Villalobos. Yeah. And I thought, oh, that's funny. I kind of know this guy. But
this is the Iceland film.
It was very exciting to be included.
It's very good, though. We've talked about it before.
It's an incredibly inclusive festival. That's what I've loved about it. I'm the least festival sort of person, I like to think, but I've always felt really at home at that festival.
Oh, great.
Well, I was going to say, one of my favourite parts of the festival, and this might sound a little bit strangely, is just to walk around the camping grounds and just see everybody's different outfits and just chat with people that are there. That's one of the best bits. Get up really early in the morning. I would make a cup of tea and just wander up and down. And I've met loads of people that I'm still in touch with now, just from doing that little tour of the campsite.
Good. Well, it's nice to. I haven't been to very many rock and roll festivals, music festivals, and I went through a phase of about 2 years of going to Enduros. Then I used to go to the Dawn to Dusk, Nick Plum's event down at Walters Arena in South Wales. I went to like 8 of them in a row in the noughties, and I didn't like the atmosphere. It was too white van man-ish, too competitive. There was no sense of, hey, look at all of us people here doing the same thing. Yeah. We kind of like, we should be friends, shouldn't we, really? We've all got the same hobby. But that atmosphere didn't exist. And I kind of wanted to, with the Vince as well, I wanted to create a motorcycle event that felt like a party and didn't feel like some kind of rollerball adversarial event where people were trying to outdo each other.
Yeah.
I want people to make friends at my events.
Yeah.
I think really pleased to hear your story now.
Yeah, well, you've really succeeded in that. And I think from the moment you arrived there and you're met by what is quite obviously a volunteer, that really is that's just an excellent start, isn't it?
As opposed to somebody from HMRC.
Well, it's just a very homely feel to it. Yeah, absolutely.
Instead of some kid with a tabard who doesn't know what's going on.
Yeah. Or at the ABR rally, they had last summer, they had 125 security guards. I was told by one of the security guards, how many security guards are there? There's 125 security guards here. At our festival, which is of course smaller, there's 0 security guards.
Yeah. And
I am very, very proud to report that.
How are we doing for time? Are you all right to carry on a little bit longer?
Yeah,
Austin?
Sure.
Yeah, because I haven't asked any of my questions, but
I've been doing. Maybe I can get a repeat booking.
No, you've answered a lot of them anyway, so they're irrelevant. And Noel's far better at asking off the cuff questions because he has to be, because he never does any preparation. So that's all right. I tell you what, let's try this. These quick fire questions, either or questions. See how we get on. You don't have to just do either or. You can expand or do what you want, really. So, So the first one, I think you've answered this already. Biker or traveller?
Neither. I'm not trying to be difficult.
No, it's fine. You can say what you want.
I would never call myself a biker because, in my mind, a biker is those guys from Every Which Way But Loose. Leather waistcoats, all that stuff. And I would never call myself a traveller because I'm not sure even what that means. Somebody who's traveling, well, that means somebody who's commuting to work is probably a traveller. So if there's connotations of what the word traveller means, I'm not sure if I would. I'd much rather call myself a member of the public than either a biker or a traveller.
Right. They're not going to get any easier, by the way. They're all contentious.
Well, they're not difficult questions.
Oh, well, it's just the answer. Okay, CRF or DR?
I'm afraid that's not. Once again, it's not a robust question. Because now, if you offered me now a brand new barn find DR350, that's obviously by definition 30 years old, never been ridden, and a brand new CRF 250L, there's no competition. It's the Honda CRF 250L. It's a superior bike. But in its day, if you'd offered me a brand new, let's say, XR 250 or a Suzuki DR350 back in 1990, if you'd offered me that choice then, actually, it would have been churlish to choose between them.
Yeah.
If it's Japanese, you've got yourself a great bike there.
Yeah.
It's the people who don't make many motorbikes that you need to worry about. I won't start a bushfire on the internet, but somebody who's making 1,000 motorbikes a year is not somebody I want to buy a motorbike from. It's as simple as that.
Well, we've both got CRFs. In fact, one of us has got 2.
I have 2,
and we didn't quite ever get to the bottom of that reason. But there we go. Right, here's another one: documentary or feature film?
Oh, I'm about to watch something. What do I choose? Is that the question?
Yeah, maybe.
Or which type would I rather make?
Yeah, which would you rather watch? Documentary or feature film?
Once again, my answer's unhelpful because Monday to Friday I tend to watch documentaries, and at the weekend I treat myself with fiction and fictional feature films. So once again, you need both. You need all the 4 main food groups. You can't stick with one or the other.
Fair enough. This one might be easier. Body armor or stiff upper lip?
Oh, I would have said stiff upper lip until I'd done a series of pretty serious crashes back in sort of like 2012. I was hurting myself a lot, and part of the reason for that was not wearing body armor. So now I wear body armor, and I haven't really badly hurt myself for a long time.
See, Noel, even Austin Vince wears body armor.
I do now, but I didn't used to, and I kind of got away with it for a long time.
Do you still fall off?
Yeah, every now and then, yeah. But also, I ride a low motorbike. I don't go very fast, but I do ride in a very rocky place in the Pyrenees where the stakes are quite high. If you come off, the chance of you, we have a lot of broken bones at the Vince, far more than I've never been trail riding ever in the UK and ended up with one of the group in casualty. At the Vince, we have somebody in hospital with a broken leg every year. It's all rock. And the smallest, I watched a guy come off in front of me the other day. He was doing 5 miles an hour at the most. Hospital. Massive, complicated, smashed up tibia. And if you'd seen it, if I showed you the film of what caused this awful injury to his leg, you'd say there's no way that injury and that crash are the same thing, and they were. But because it's rock. Yeah. No, it's unforgiving.
Okay, there's another one. Punk rock or rock and roll?
When you say rock and roll, when you say punk rock, do you mean 70s punk rock?
Yeah.
Okay, well then I'm not interested in that. I'm only interested in punk rock 66. Yeah, let's say December 65 to early 67, that punk rock. Sonics, Wailers, Standells, Remains.
Stooges fit in there somewhere?
No, that's too late for me. The reasons the Stooges are great, MC5, great, but they were late to the party. And I'm much more interested in the guys that were kind of freaking out, the Monks. Yeah, the Monks would be the band that I'd hold up and say, look at what these guys were doing in 1966, and then look at John Lydon, Johnny Rotten, and Sid Vicious. They look like just a couple of choir boys compared to the Monks, And then, of course, really, we need to say, well, look at what Hazel Adkins. Look at what was Johnny Burnett doing in 1956? He was or even good Jerry Lewis. I mean, they were so out there, and because they've become famous, we think, oh yeah, they were mainstream. No, they weren't. They were absolute, and Elvis, absolute outsiders. So yeah, 70s punk rock, I was there and I didn't notice anything of any interest, frankly. But of course, the punk rock ethic, I'm right behind. But when you say rock and roll, of course, I think of, to me, that would mean Sun rock and roll. Sun Elvis, Jerry Lee, Johnny Cash, Carl Perkins. Then if you're talking about that rock and roll, I'll listen to that all day.
Yeah. I love that. I did a Sun Studios tour once.
It's not very long.
Well, it's amazing. It's 3 rooms. And you can't even go into the last room because that's where the big mixing desk is. So you're only allowed in these 2 rooms. But it was like a nearly religious experience.
Yeah,
absolutely brilliant.
One of my friends got married there.
I got married in Vegas by an Elvis. He said, "Hey,
really?
Yeah." He said, "Hey, you guys know Noel from?" It's like, no, this is not you. The other Noel that was in that famous band.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's the same one that married him. But it was like a gay Nick Cave more than Elvis. Really, slightly disappointing, but funnier just because of that. Good. And do you do music now? Don't you?
Yeah, I'm in the studio all the time. Like a lot of people. I was in bands when I was young, in my 20s. That was great. We never got signed. I was a full-time teacher. I didn't do the thing of giving up my job and being in the band as my job, or trying to make being in the band as my job. I was always too cautious for that, and I regret that enormously. And the other guys, I was in the band with Phil Alexander, who was who at that time was working at Kerrang and would then go on to become the editor of Kerrang. So he was in the music industry already, but there's no way he was going to give up his career to work in our band. And so that was all great fun, but then it kind of fitted away. But then a funny thing happened when we did Mondo Enduro. I was in a band called the Quakers, and we used to dress up as that play, the Arthur Miller play, The Crucible. Set in the 1660s witch hunt. Yeah. Obviously, it's all about the McCarthy, McCarthy era. All right. So we used to dress up as Quakers from The Crucible, and then play.
As you do.
Then play. The set was basically Kinks, B-sides, Rolling Stones, instrumentals, stuff like that. But the whole set came from between 64 and 66. We took a lot of kind of standard 60s punk songs and rewrote hard. Right, imagine if ISIS had a Christian wing who were in a band. That's what the Quakers was meant to sound. And so when you went to a Quakers gig, it was you got hectored by me as the lead singer. You got hectored for not being pious enough. Anybody with flamboyant clothing on or hair products, something like that, they were pilloried for deviating from the path of plain living. That was the whole idea. And the plain living extended itself into the music, which was, of course, had a heavy, 3/4 chord lineup. But the entire gig was delivered as a service, as a church service. It was good. Quakers were a good band, and then so when I got back from, so the Quakers actually were at the top of their game when I went on Mondo Enduro in '95. I tell you, a brush with celebrity who directed the film of Trainspotting, not who wrote the
Danny
book.
Boyle.
Danny Boyle,
yes.
Danny Boyle was at one of our gigs by chance because it was a very cool club called the Frat Shack, and it was happening in Tottenham. It was totally underground, completely invitation only, packed down, like 700 people in the 3 floors of this kind of converted hotel. It was mental, absolutely mental. We were playing up on the top floor, all in the costumes. It cost a fortune to rent all the costumes for the hats and these incredible wigs and the funny chin beard and all the doublets and these massive thick. Danny Boyle saw the band and he asked us to be. He came up to us. He said, "I'm Danny Boyle," and this is like in '94. So it's totally Trainspotting or whatever. And he did Shallow Grave, didn't he? Isn't that the whole thing?
Yeah.
He also did an episode of Inspector Morse, which I was in and met him.
Really?
Yeah.
So we both got the Danny Boyle. So he asked us to be in his next film. We said, yeah, totally. But then I went off on Mondo Enduro. That was the end of that. But my point is that when we got back from Mondo Enduro, I got the Quakers together and we wrote all of the music for the Mondo Enduro film, which was 48 separate tracks, including the sung theme, and it was sung by a guy called Parsley. He was the organ player in the Quakers. So it was once again, it's all to make the long way around comparison. I read somewhere where one of them said that they were texting lyric ideas from their tent to that band, some band that was going to do the theme tune for them. I can't remember.
I'm not even going to Google it.
Yeah, this is like, when you're a famous actor, people in famous rock bands, so that's how the Long Way Round theme happened. And the Mondo Enduro theme is we fucking wrote the songs ourselves, and booked a studio time and learned to play instruments and recorded them. We didn't get someone else to do it.
Excellent. Another question. These are I like these. These are working out quite well. I wasn't sure whether they'd work or not, but
I don't want you to think that I'm a difficult customer.
No.
I can't. If you give me a straight choice where I know which one I choose, I'll tell you.
And I don't want you to do that. I want you to
like
talk.
Sushi versus
fish fingers. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. 50/50s or Nobblies?
Oh, Nobblies the whole time. Well, it's certainly while I'm riding a CRF 250L. If I was a street biker, I would have street tires.
Yeah, good. That's what we always say. Nobblies, forget 50/50s.
And also the fraction idea, this, when people say 80/20, 50/50, what they don't understand, or I'll rephrase that. Of course they understand, but what I think is important to point out is that if you're on a road trip, a long road trip, but you intend to rough camp, only 1% of your day will be off-road. But that's the 1% when you need 100% Nobblies. And so it's because a Knobbly tire can be ridden on tarmac all day, and it still works, especially modern dual purpose tires. I use the Michelin Tracker, used to be the Michelin AC10. Those tires, when you go around corners on them, don't let you down. There's no sensation, oh my God, I want a dirt bike tire. Not at all. So they're like fantastic road tires all day, certainly on a 250 for me. And then the second you get to the trailhead and you think, let's go up here and find somewhere to camp, they're kicking ass and taking names.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's so important to be able to get to that spot, isn't it, at night? And if it facilitates that, it's definitely worth it.
I could write a book I could fill a book with stories of co-riders who've had the wrong tires on, and we go off at the end of the day trying to find a camp spot. Don't know where we're going, don't know where we are, and we can't go any further because of that guy's choice of tire. Yeah. We have to turn around and go back and camp somewhere crap when there was somewhere amazing waiting for us up that trail. just because a selfish person would say, "Oh no, I don't want to have knobbly tires,"
Yeah.
Don't get me going.
Yeah.
We did a couple of beginners' guides to trail riding, and that's what we said. Forget 50/50 tyres, just get knobblies. Just no argument, just do it.
And when they wear out, change them. People was going on about, "Oh my God, my tyres will wear out. That's no good." Or what do you think is going to happen to them? You'd never leave home if you're worried about consumables wearing out, would you? You'd have to store your tyres. So,
I often have this argument with Noel because it is all about miles per gallon. And I'm saying, well, if you don't want to use petrol, I can sell all your motorbikes. It's not what motorbikes are about.
What's your best MPG on the CRF?
I'm getting about 80 on mine.
Both of you, what's your all-time best?
I don't know. I've never calculated it.
You
and I
liar.
don't think
You liar. You're obsessed with it. That's all you talk about, ever.
I don't calculate it because I'm just more amazed at how little it takes to fill up each time that I just think, I can't believe I've been riding 2 days and it's cost me £12.
You don't even have to disturb the cobwebs in your pocket, do you?
So I don't. But I mean, you've got a miles per gallon on your dash, haven't you? I don't have that on a 250.
I think the most I've ever got is about 82 on mine. I've got a new 300, but I've only done 400 miles on mine, so it's all.
I was amazed to find with some pretty aggressive and thorough, data number crunching that my trail riding MPG was the same as my motorway cruising MPG, 85 on both occasions.
Well, I spoke to Greg today, and he said he did a trip up into Scotland on his own, camped out for the night, and came back, and he said he was getting 100 miles per gallon.
Incredible.
It's good. The highest I've ever heard of that is validified or credible is 92. I'm sure your listeners will phone in with their outrageous stories of 250 miles per gallon.
Greg's absolutely tiny, so he'd have just been able to hide behind the clocks or something like that. All right, last one. 2-piece or all-in-one?
Well, I tend to be an all-in-one person at the moment.
That's the question. Why? How did this happen? How did you start? How did you get into the overalls?
In Turkey on Terra Circa, when we used to wear full leathers, separate leather jeans and leather jacket, but it was getting too hot and it was too uncomfortable. And me and Dave Greenhow on Terra Circa, we saw a shop selling overalls, so we bought a pair of cotton overalls each. I'd never owned my own pair of overalls, but we put them on. Then we saw a haberdasher with a man sitting in the window doing alterations. So we bought some stripes and asked him to sew the stripes on, basically thinking of that, the famous McQueen Le Mans picture.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the seats were sewn at Wembley.
No, not at all. Because that's, and it's leather and it's applique or it's aperture. He has star-shaped holes cut in the side of the jeans with white leather behind them. So it's a different technique, really. And we had these overalls with these stripes stuck on them. And then we saw some patches for sale. We got them sewn on as well. We walked around, the two of us, in these matching overalls. And I just felt like $1 million. I've never felt so alive. And I thought, this is a great look. And people were looking at us in the street, which they never used to do, wearing my really expensive leather jacket and really expensive tailored leather trousers. Yeah. My trousers and my jacket were hundreds and hundreds of pounds each, expensively tailored. And these £20 overalls were head turners. And then I got a set in Tokyo on Terra Circa in 2001. Then we got to Hawaii on the way to America, had some more stripes sewn onto them, and then it went mad. People were coming up to me in the street saying, "Where did you get those overalls?" And I'd say, "I did them myself." And they're like, "What? Why? Can't I buy them?" Anyway, that's another story. So yeah, one piece. That's where it came from.
Do you have like an Elton John wardrobe of the full spectrum of colours?
Yeah. I have about 40 pairs of overalls.
Wow.
Normally, we send people that have been guests on the podcast. We normally send them a T-shirt, but I don't suppose you've ever worn a T-shirt, have you?
No, I don't wear T-shirts, no.
So I've had specially made just for you.
Yeah.
A patch to sew onto your overalls, which I'll send you.
Yeah, is that the only one in the world?
No, I've got 10 of them done. It was cheaper.
10.
You got 10 patches done?
Yeah.
And would you mind answering the question as to how much they cost?
I think they're about $5 each. So it's
that's great.
Is that?
I will absolutely guarantee that I will put that patch on my overalls, on one set of overalls that I'd wear.
I think it might even be. I think it's even iron-on, possibly.
Oh, don't worry about that. I'll sew it on.
Fantastic.
I'll oversew the iron-on glue. Quickly tell me, whereabouts are you guys exactly? Was one of you near Kendal?
We're both near Kendal. I'm west of Kendal, near a place called Sedbergh.
Yeah.
And Noel's, you're just north of Kendal, aren't you, Noel?
Yeah. Wait a minute. Yeah. Sedbergh's not west of Kendal.
East of
Kendal.
Yeah.
Silly
he always
gets your story doesn't check out then, does
he
it?
He always gets those two mixed up.
I have to go west to get into Kendal. That's what it is. So.
As a child, as a keen train spotter, I was obsessed with the Settle to Carlisle Railway. So I had many holidays before I was even 13, basically shuttling myself and my dad up between Settle and Carlisle. And then weirdly, when I went to Mill Hill School, they had their own field study centre in the village of Dent. They used to take us little North London oiks up there to go caving and walk the Three Peaks and stuff like that, and go to Ingleton and look at Thornton Force and everything. So I had a kind of incredibly massive Yorkshire Dales part of my life as a youngster, and of course I fell in love with it enormously. And then when I went to work at Mill Hill as an adult teacher, we were still doing those trips. And then I got the privilege of being paid to go back there every year, walking. I was a top rope and abseiling instructor by then, so I was teaching kids to climb on the crag opposite White Scar Caves. Is that what they're called?
Yeah.
So on the road, on that straight road that goes, between Ingleton and Rulehead. Yeah. So that's a big part of my life. So don't think of me as just a townie from the south.
So a couple more questions then, and these are from our listeners. One of the questions was, are you pleased with the impact and the success of the Trans-Euro Trail?
You know what I'm going to say. You must know what I'm going to say because you know that I'm, dare I say, a trail riding industry professional. So I want everyone to go trail riding, obviously. And I want to share the love. I love it's the international, Eurocentric element of the TET which excites me the most. And of course the dream, once the TET extends into Central Asia and Russia, that will be, I don't know if that will happen in our lifetime, but I think it will happen. And I don't know if it'll be under the TET banner, but that will be fantastic, really fantastic. So I'm massively into the TET. What of course I can't bear seeing is people getting into a pickle on the TET when it would appear to a layman that they were out of their depth, when it's obvious. And what we don't want is, like trail riding in Britain, we don't want sections of the TET being over trafficked by people who then get stuck and are having to call mountain rescue, or annoying a certain farmer in a certain place. We want that. We're back to the TRF code of conduct, aren't we? Some people don't realise how delicate a house of cards this is, and we mustn't knock it down. And what stops us from knocking it down is our excellent and exemplary behaviour. And no one's used to it. As it's the school teacher in me. See, people are not used to being told how to behave, and they don't like it. Or not. A lot of people really resent being given a code of conduct. They think it's incredibly insulting. And I would humbly suggest that, of course, it's not meant to insult anybody. It's meant to keep the house of cards standing up. And there's no point in letting the house of cards fall down and then afterwards saying, I didn't realise it would fall down. That's what the guardians of the TET and the guardians of the TRF need to do, what it takes to stop somebody through their, let's say, good-natured ignorance, knocking down the house of cards.
I think we should do an episode, Noel, of talking about code of conduct and behaviour on trails. I think there's a subject there.
Do it as a compilation. Ask everybody that question and then make an anthology of good answers.
I'm sort of one of the administrators. Well, I'm probably one of two people that sort of run the Instagram page for the TET.
I didn't know that.
And one of the things we try to do is just to sort of include, as subtly as we can, points from the code of conduct with each post in a way, or just reinforce it the whole time.
Yeah.
And you're right. It's really hard to do, Austin, isn't it? In a way that doesn't come over completely, in a way that turns people off or makes them feel lectured to. Yeah. Really difficult.
We've got to keep trying.
Right, I think we'll do one more question and then we'll call it a night. It's been brilliant. Are you looking forward to electric motorbikes?
as an older man now, as a 56-year-old, there's going to be a day eventually when I'm going to be finding it harder to trail ride, or I'm more creaky, or I'm more scared of crashing, and I'll probably be retiring to some kind of either electric mountain bike thing or something. The punk rocker inside me wants an electric motorbike to ride on public footpaths and bridleways, which I would not feel was an unethical act. I think it's all about the noise. It's as simple as that. Yeah. And I can't imagine I can afford one for the time being, but yes, I've got no problem with it. And also the wind is blowing that way. It wasn't that long ago when normal people would have just gone mental if you told them they couldn't drink alcohol and then drive their car. They would have just said, well, you're out of your mind. Of course I could do that. It's like smoking indoors. In our lives, we've seen the wheel turn. And then we're all old enough to imagine a time when everybody smoked. Everybody smoked all the time. My teachers used to smoke in lessons. and it changes. And 100 years from now, there won't be dirt biking, will there? Hopefully it'll be all electric.
Yeah.
And then, of course, people will be saying, can you believe it? They used to be like roaring across this prairie, making a load of bike, making a huge racket. And they got away with it. Yeah. But yeah, so it's going to happen whether we like it or not. We have to obviously just try and be one step ahead of the curve, and we, embrace the inevitable change. I think it takes older people, dare I say, like us, to realise that things can't be the same the whole time. That's the Brexit. That's the Brexit nostalgia thing. It's not Britain's not the country it used to be. There is no British Empire. Things have changed, and we've got to work with that, or be in a real pickle.
Yeah.
All right, lads. Thanks for having me. Really flattered to have been asked to be on your show, and you're very good at letting me witter on. Okie dokie.
Right. Bye.
Bye.
What did you think of that? That was quite special, wasn't it?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I was quite apprehensive about it because I bumped into Austin at sort of NEC bike shows. I happened to be on the same ferry as him when he was going out to Spain to do a film in 2012. But it's always been at the wrong time to sort of sit down and have a chat with him. He's always been busy doing something else. So it was great to just be voice to voice with him like that.
I've bumped into him a couple of times as well, and he's very open. He will just talk to anybody. That whole thing about, I'm just a citizen. I've made a couple of films. I do this, but that's me. He is very, very approachable. But what a raconteur.
Is raconteur the right word?
I think it is, yeah. It's somebody that's really good and amusing at speaking.
Well, he's all of that. Definitely all of that, isn't he?
He's very good.
God, it was such good value. I kind of listened to it, the link he sent me today, and I thought, this is why I said you're putting it out as a two-parter. It's too good to give away in one go.
Well, I don't know. I couldn't. There was no.
I think it has to be. It's good in its entirety, though, isn't it?
Yeah, people can pick and choose whether they'd have listened to it by now. But it's an hour and 19 minutes of just sheer talking fun.
Yeah, and passion. He's so passionate about it. I can't believe you brought up you and Charlie. That was outrageous.
That's what everybody wants to know. I'm just doing it for the people.
I was genuinely going to. I thought today, God, I think I am going to send him my copy of Mondo Enduro because it seems terrible that he doesn't have a copy of it himself anymore. Well, I just picked it off the shelf and I looked in the cover and there's a lovely little message from Ashley with the deck 2007 when she gave it to me. But yeah, it was great. I loved it, and I thought he was really easy to talk to, very candid about stuff. Thought it was great.
Yeah, you kind of feel that what you see is what you get. There's no other side to him, is there really?
It was an easy edit then.
It was just the easiest edit I've ever done. It was just like those whole sections of 5 and 10 minutes. I didn't even need to take anything out. It was literally, instead of taking me an hour and a half, well, it was we nearly recorded for 2 hours, and normally that's probably like 3 days' work almost. And it took me 3 hours in total, I think, which is good. So he's got a couple of events coming up that people should definitely try and get to. One is the Adventure Travel Film Festival.com. There's one in the Cotswolds in England in August, and August the 12th and 14th, and one in Scotland in Perth in July the 8th to the 10th. And then
What's the event in Scotland?
Well, it's the Adventure Travel Film Festival.
Oh, the film festival's put on up there.
Yeah.
I didn't think we talked enough about the film festival, but I was going to say, if people are thinking about the film festival, it does always sell out pretty quickly, I think.
The other thing was the Vints, which is the trail biking orienteering fun thing in the Pyrenees. That's in September. And I think there's something like 180 places for that, for accommodation. And he said there's 112 tickets already sold. And if you get in early, it's 260 quid. I just read it a bit on the on his website. Motocross spaceman clothes are forbidden. Wear armour, yes, but under your crocheted poncho. Thanks for listening. We really appreciate your support. Don't forget you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And if you really appreciate what we do, you could consider supporting us on Patreon or buy us a coffee. Links are available on our website, which is tampodcast.com, tampodcast.com, where we also have a limited selection of branded stuff. But either way, please keep listening and spreading the word. See you next time.